So what's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, doing a little bit different video. Why? Because it's gonna rain all day and camera and rain doesn't really work. You see, one of the questions that we get a lot is how we rotationally graze our cows, how we move them, the setup that makes it so easy for us to move them to where it only takes maybe 4 or 5 minutes a day for us to move the cows. So I'm gonna show you how we got that set up. Now, did it on a whiteboard, so excuse my drawing. Not an artist, don't claim to be, never will be, okay? And we're doing it on the floor because I drew it upside down. Here is my beautifully drawn diagram, map, whatever you want to call it, of our farm. Everything is not to scale. Why? Just, it's hard to. But if you want to get a layout, we have basically a rectangle here, goes a little bit farther that way, and a bigger square here. Now that adds up to 30 acres. Of which 28 and a half, 29 is pasture. You have our driveway here and our yard area that, you know, that's our area. The rest, mostly pasture or ponds. So to give you a little bit of context for those of you who've been following us for a while, this pasture down here, this is our best one. This is where we ran the chickens this year. So if you look back, this is the pasture that you'll see the chickens in. Here's the highway. It's a 70-mile-an-hour highway. That's why our livestock guardian dogs are not out roaming around, because they're my boys. And that right there is a livestock guardian dog, Destins, okay? So they are in our yard. They patrol this whole area. They're able to see this whole area. So any animals that are over here, they can kind of protect because they're out barking. But anyways, here's the legend, okay? My very sophisticated legend. Anything that you see that's a solid red line, like down here, is where we ran our electric line. Water is blue, pond, or water line. We got the permanent fences, really just the boundary fences, in black. The gates, you'll see little things like this in purple that are gates, okay? So that'll tell you, you know, where we can lock stuff up and whatnot. Anywhere that you see dash lines, don't have any on here right now because I'm going to explain that to you. That's going to be our temporary fences. When you see a little vertical line, that is our water access points for our water line. You can see those right there. And the dots are where we have electric gate handles. So let's get into this, okay? We're going to really focus on this pasture here because this is probably the easiest one to explain. This whole setup right here was not here when we got the place, okay? It was just a blank slate. Everything was open. There was no lane, no nothing. So what we did is we came in with T-post and we put T-post all along here. And the red line that you see is just a single line. Of poly wire about belt buckle high. That's how I determined how high to put the electric fence clip. And that goes on both sides, okay? From here to the end is approximately 600 feet. So that'll give you just a little bit of context. Right now, the cows are over here, and I'm gonna draw in where we have the electric fences set up. But the cows right now are in this paddock right here. This is 300 feet long by 75 feet wide, which equals just about half an acre, so it's kind of easy to calculate. And if you guys saw back to a previous video that I did where we're trying to get 33% more grass, what I did was instead of having this 75 feet wide, it was 25 feet wide, so this was in thirds. Now, I changed that up because the cows, they got a little bit stressed with that. Right now we're running 13 head and, you know, maybe 3 or 4 of them wide, especially with the longhorns. So they got a little bit stressed with that, but I still want to move them every day to a smaller section. So this is what I did. Instead of the lines going vertical, what I did is I went horizontal across the whole 75 feet. So that way their water's here, and then they have access to this portion for one day, this portion for a second day, but they can come back to their water, and then this portion the third day and still get back to their water. So the experiment in doing the vertical lines, that didn't do very well because it's just, I could see them being stressed. I'm not some sort of cow whisperer or whatever, but I can kind of see it in their eyes, if that makes any kind of sense, and they're, you know, bawling a little bit more. They're still mobbed up, but they get a wider section each day, and then the next day it gets bigger, and the next day it gets bigger. So that's the way that I'm doing it from now on because it seems to be working a lot better and the cows are a lot more comfortable, and that's always a good thing. So now we're going to talk about the water line that we ran. Along where the T-posts are with the electric fence, we ran a water line all the way back from our well all the way over here. It runs, I believe it's 1,400 feet to the end of the property here. It was ran with 1/2 inch high density polyethylene tubing. That way, the smaller the hole, the more pressure it can reach. Then we have an adapter that goes from 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch, to where the 1/2 inch is the push in and the 3/4 inch is the thread it. Then it goes to a threaded PVC ball valve, and on top of the ball valve, we have a quick connect. That way we can just go, unhook it, boom, put it in. And then we can turn the ball valve off when we're not in that specific paddock. And because we were in Texas, and because when we were putting this in, this was still kind of experimental, we kept it above the ground, just zip tied it to each of the, T-post. But this right here is 100% working out. I would have no problem burying this maybe next year. But I don't think we really need to, because it doesn't really freeze during the day here because we're so far south. So all we have to do is really just make sure they have water before it freezes at night. But the first thing I recommend doing is, if you want to get into rotational grazing and moving the cows every day or every other day or once a week, once a month, whatever it is, okay, is figure out your water situation. We could have gone off of the pond and made paddocks going kind of like a wheel spoke, but that's not something we wanted to do, because it would make it really difficult once we got over this way to get a line back to the pond for the cows. Just make it a little bit harder. So what we did at the same time is we put in this, what I would call now permanent electric fence. It's just poly wire, just one strand, running all the way to the end of the property. And this right here, we just keep our, portable solar energizer right there, and it actually does the whole deal. Plus, with all these lines connected, no problem. It's a 120 energizer from Premier One, works great. So if you can put in water line and electric fence, try and cut your farm in half. Why? Because worst comes to worst, you can just have the cows on this side for, a couple weeks, then move them to this side for a couple weeks, then move them back to this side for a couple weeks, and just rotationally graze them like that if you don't have the setup for it just yet. But to anyone getting started, I highly recommend doing this. Now, do you have to put in a lane? No, you don't. You don't have to put in a lane at all, but I like the lane, one, because I think it looks really nice. What it does is give me kind of a work area to where, I can take down the electric line, leave the fence post in here. I don't have to worry about the cows messing with them, stepping on them, breaking them, getting into trouble with them. I just like this. Then the second thing, what this line is also going to end up doing, this line's going to end up being like our permaculture orchard, to where we're going to have trees on either side of the lane. It's only 15 feet wide, but I think it's going to look really nice, look really pretty, and just keep everything a lot more organized. I like the lane so much. Now you're going to say, oh, you're going to waste grass here. Now some of you might say, oh, you're going to waste all this pasture and grass right here. No, not really. Why? Because I'm just going to run a line from here to here, and they can have that for maybe, it's a small area, so maybe just a couple hours, half a day at most, and then move them out to the regular pasture. Now this right here was a permanent paddock that was set up before we got here, and it's actually been pretty nice because it's kind of got two sections, and this is where we're keeping our hay right now. But what you might have a question about is, how do you graze this up here if you're just going to run the temporary lines all the way here? What we're going to do is put in maybe a 10-12 foot long lane right here, and then have it go up so the cows can graze that area for a day, but have their water right there. The key is, how do you get them water? Now, what happens if you don't have a rectangle? See, I like to keep the paddock 75 by 300 because that's roughly half an acre, and it just makes it easier. Over here, we don't necessarily have that luxury, because this right here, from that end up there to this end right here, is roughly about 900 feet. So what we did was, again, run the water line all the way to the end here, and then created another lane here. So all we're gonna do is, this water line will feed both sides. So the cow's gonna be here, and the water line's there. Now down here, we don't have access to water, but we have a pond. Now eventually what we're gonna do is to tap into this water line here, run it along this side, run it along our yard, along the house, and have it come to where it can get into this pasture here. That way we don't have to always give them access to the pond. And then it's going to make it a lot easier for us to run the water line this way around this pasture here, because this is right here is our best pasture, and this is where we ran the chickens last year. I don't know if we're going to run them here again. We might do it up there or somewhere that way. That way all the different pastures can get a little bit of that chicken fertilizer goodness. But then we can, instead of running hoses from the well to here, because it's not too terribly far, we can just go tap into a water line just like we're doing over there. So it makes it really, really easy. Now back to over here. What we have is quite a bit of electric fence lines to where we can go set up a week's worth of paddocks in front of them. And it just makes it a lot easier because some days you just have to, because some days you're just kind of in a rush and don't want to, you know, go set up a whole brand new paddock. So I suggest getting lots and lots of reels. The more reels you have, probably the better. Because then if you need to move them from this paddock to this paddock here, all you have to do is disconnect the wire and walk them on through, no big deal. Now the reason why we're giving them this small of a paddock here, it's about 100 by 75, is because it's wintertime and the grass isn't growing as fast. It's still growing a little bit. We actually have green grass over here now, which is pretty incredible. But for the most part, the grass has slowed down a lot. Will I keep these paddocks the same size in the springtime? Absolutely not. I'll probably give them 2 of these. Why? Because then it'd be 150 by 300, and that'll equal right around an acre. And we can get around the whole farm in 30 days trying to catch up with the grass. In the summertime, I'll probably just give them 1. Why? Grass has slowed down just a little bit, half acre, so then we're doing a 60-day rotation. When we get into the fall and wintertime, they're going to be back like this. Why? Because it's about a 120-day rotation that they'll be on, and that should get us through wintertime in Texas. Might have to feed a little bit of hay here and there, but because of the rotational grazing, we're going to have grow back to where we might not have to. We might not have to feed hay. And that is always, always, always a good thing. Why? Because 80% of your cost with cows is hay. So if you can cut that out, oh my gosh, this is going to be so much easier. So this will give you kind of an idea how we rotate our cows around. But when we come to the pond, I know a couple people have had a couple questions about how we do it. Now, it depends on the season, really. If it's the wintertime, they're not going to really get in there, and it's only 13 head, and they're only going to be there for a day or 2 on each side. So we'll just go like this, and just give them the area. No big deal, they'll get in there just a little bit. But now, if it's in the spring or summertime, we're gonna go like this and fence off our pond with an electric line. Why? Because we don't want the cows pooping and peeing in the pond, and then we don't want them just standing in the water too long to try and cool off, because then it'll give them hoof rot. But this year, we're working on a clockwise rotation. Now, I haven't decided what I'm gonna do next year, because ideally, we'd go, okay, we're doing clockwise one year, we're going to do counterclockwise the next year. Why? Because it'll stimulate different grasses to grow up depending on, you know, when they're eating it. But I think I'm only going to do that if we end up feeding hay. I don't think right now that we will need to. And if we do, I'm kind of torn between either going and unrolling the hay or creating a system here with this permanent paddock to where we lock them in here until they're done eating hay in springtime, because it's only going to be for a short amount of time, and then covering up their manure with wood chips like Joel Salatin does. Kind of torn right now. I don't know. I don't know which way we're going to go with that. We'll see. But what we won't do is we won't just leave a bale in a round bale feeder and have them go eat it. Why? Because it's kind of dangerous for the calves. And 2, it just messes up the ground wherever those feeders are. But we're still in a clockwise rotation. It's real easy to move them. The hardest issue is right here across the driveway. Some of you guys have seen those videos before. The first day that we got the cows and we were moving out the pasture, it was just the 3. It was Yoli, Betty, and Daphne. They came out of this gate. I set up a line here. Thought they would just, you know, follow through because I had a line right here. They didn't, and they didn't. That caused a bunch of headaches. But now they're walking across the driveway just fine. We've done it twice, no issues. So all we do is open up these 2 gates here, and they'll come across with alfalfa pellets. Same thing here. They'll just walk through these gates. You open it up, and they just follow. You know, I call them. If it's a bigger move, like they're going through a gate, I'll bring the alfalfa pellets just because I don't want any issues. I don't want, you know, I just want them to follow, and they will. So that's how, for the most part, we are doing our rotational grazing, and that is my best attempt at drawing our farm and the layout of it. So I hope that helped. Hopefully you guys can take a little something from that and apply it to your place. And to see more tips like this, consider hitting that subscribe button down below. Ring the notification bell so you get notified when we put up new videos. Hit the like button because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm, and drop a comment if you like, alright? Until next time, see ya. Bye.